Hello, my name is John Alston. I'm a member of several different organizations. I decided not to put my credentials up or the experiences that I've had. I see it from a lot of the names that are very familiar from different jobs that I've had, organizations I've belonged to. And I also saw some names and places and folks that are coming from across not only the United States, but I also welcome my friends from abroad. This evening, we're going to be talking about public speaking made easy. And I know that sounds real cliche. I know it sounds like someone could say, hey, look, anyone that can talk can speak in public. Well, yes and no. We're going to be talking about a few things that will aid you in making sure that when you do have the opportunity to speak in public, that you are prepared and that you have a system in place. And when I say system, sometimes folks go, well, wait a minute, don't you just get up and talk? Well, sometimes you do. There are some folks who are great at, at being able to stand up in front of a crowd at any time and speak. But I have not ever in my life met a natural born airline pilot. I've never met a natural born plumber. I've never met, thank goodness, a natural born electrician. Being in the fire service, I appreciate the fact that people take the time to study, prepare, have the right tools, and also make sure that they follow a system of sorts. Now, are there some folks who are comfortable, more comfortable than others in speaking in public? Yes, they actually do exist. But I also know that the good speakers and even the great speakers, and I've met quite a few in my life, always prepare somehow, always follow some methodology, always have some type of framework that they operate in. My pastor, Jerry Michael Sanders, when you hear him preach, it is so personal. It is so right on point. Is a transcript preacher. If you ever see him preach, he has his sermons on these 5x7 index cards. And if you watch closely, you'll see him move from card to card. But the message that he delivers, and in the way that he delivers the message, you don't even pay attention to that. It is a it is a wonder to see. I've had some mentors in my life and continue to have them. I've watched Dr. Dennis O'Neil, Dr. Carl Holmes get up, and at a moment's notice, they'll say, "Hey, can you give us a few remarks?" And they stand and deliver, flat-footed, and give you some powerful nuggets that you can take home. And you say, "Wow!" I mean, we just asked that person to get up and speak, and they delivered one of the best speeches I ever heard in my life. It still comes from preparation. So what we're going to talk about tonight, and it's going to be very short because I know you're all zoomed out. Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, FaceTime. This time in our nation and in our world, it's been pretty tough on folks being confined. And so I wanted to have a little fun. I wanted to make sure that we talked about some things that may help you in the future. You might be looking for a new job. You might be looking for a job. You might be up for a promotion. You might want to better communicate with your family. Believe it or not, it takes practice sometimes if it's a tough subject. What I want to be able to do with you is share some of the things that I've found that work, and we can talk about some other things that don't work. And in the middle of one of these things, we're going to hit you with a poll, and I'd like to see what you're thinking. All right. So if you just give me a hot second with the technology, we'll begin. And again, thank you so much for taking this time. When it comes to public speaking, we want to talk about public speaking made easy. The first thing that you want to do is know your audience. And sometimes that's tough. If you've been invited someplace to speak, if you're fortunate to have that happen, you may not know the audience right away. Well, that's when your homework begins. You need to know the audience. You need to know what they're asking you to speak about. Do your research. Google is one of those wonderful things that even in a Uber cab, or even before you prepare for an evening tonight, you can look up the background of the organization, the audience, and what you're being asked to do. It doesn't hurt to prepare. Like I said, there are no natural born pilots. Thank goodness. All right. It takes preparation. Make sure that you know the audience, what the audience is looking for. One of the ways that you can know the audience too is whomever invited you to speak in the first place, ask them about their previous speakers. Ask them about the subjects that they've had in the past. Get to know your audience, get to know the organization, get to know the group, get to know the family member, get to know the relationship, get to know as much as you can about the folks. Dale Carnegie said one of the most beautiful sounds a person can ever hear is their name on your lips. In other words, if I say something that is familiar with you, that you know, I'm going to be able to make that connection with you. And we can agree that Dale Carnegie was a very successful person. So in knowing your audience, that's one of the critical things that you can do. Do your homework. And that's really what it's about, making sure when you have to prepare to speak, particularly publicly, rehearse over and over and over and over again. Particularly if you have a big speech that's coming out. One of my mentors, Bobby Halton from Fire Engineering and FDIC, is a dynamic speaker. Bobby has the ability to motivate, to tap into your emotion, if you will. He comes from a knowledge base because he brings facts and case studies, but his passion is so tremendous that you feel it. You might feel one way walking into one of his presentations or speeches, but at the end of it, you start to feel a whole nother way. I happen to know that Bobby rehearses. He rehearses repeatedly, making sure that every phrase, every reference fits. Bobby, I'm sorry, I'm telling you secrets. He's got a binder. I learned that from him. If I'm going to do a speech, I write it out. Even though it's going to be on a teleprompter, maybe, or may have to come from my heart, I'm going to make sure that I have every frame of reference, every fact checked, and I'm going to make sure that I fit within the time frame that I've been allotted. Because that's the other thing. If you don't rehearse repeatedly, you may run over or you may be too short. Either way, your audience is going to feel the impact and you may not get invited again. You want to make sure that that contract that you have with them when you're going to speak, the contract that you have is that I'm not going to keep you more than 7 minutes. I'm not going to keep you more than 15 minutes. Now, back to preachers, okay? Their favorite line is, I'm not going to hold you long. When you hear that, they're going to hold you long. Just be prepared for it. But if you rehearse repeatedly over and over and over again, it will become familiar with you. The pronunciation of the words, the timing, but also in rehearsing, you have to make sure you rehearse along with distractions. You have to make sure that when you rehearse in your car or when you rehearse in your home, my speeches, sometimes I rehearse them in the shower. I know. I rehearse them over and over again. You have to practice with distractions. Put the television on, particularly a news show, because you want to make sure that if you have to deliver a speech and you start to speak in an audience, what does it mean when you're standing in front of someone and you're giving a speech and you've prepared it and someone gets up and walks out? They just get up and walk out. You don't know the reason why they're walking out. Now, if it's more than one person walking out, in fact, if they start to file out, I would check your speech and I would check your delivery. But if a person gets up and walks out, you can't let that distract you. Okay. You don't know the reason why they're getting up and you're not going to have time to figure that out. Plus, if you're focused on that one person that's leaving, what does it say to those that are remaining? So if you practice with distractions, it gives you the opportunity to make sure that if you stumble, you have some type of recovery. And if there are particular pieces in the speech that you're going to give, you want to make sure that those are the things that you put forth and make sure that you focus on. Now, familiarize yourself with the environment. Now, that not only means the organization, that means the room. It means the PA system. Are you going to be using a handheld mic? Are you going to be using a lavalier or a wireless mic? Are you going to be able to move around? Are you going to be at a podium? Are you going to be able to set your notes in front of you? Are you going to be able to walk through the room and not cause any feedback with the PA system? There's several different ways that you want to be able to familiarize yourself, if you can, with the environment. Now, we haven't been able to do that lately. I live in an area of the country where we have not been able to gather as groups. Some of you already know that we have actually had many of our conferences canceled. Um, we've had many of our conferences canceled, um, and not been able to go and visit with our friends or present. I've been trying to get several of. Oh, you see my script. Oh, someone told me they see my script. I appreciate that. If you've noticed, I'm off script, so I'm okay. I greatly appreciate that. Piece of cake. I hope that's better for you. Many times you have to familiarize yourself with the environment. Thank you. And familiarize yourself with the equipment too, as well. You want to make sure that your slides work. You want to make the tile timely. You also want to make sure that you're not too loud for your audience. I apologize. Someone said much better. Thank you. Thank you, audience member. You got to love that. You have to be able to make sure that you can work with distractions. How about that? Awesome. You want to be able to make sure that you able to present and continue to go, no matter what goes on. Slides going the wrong way, telephone ringing, all kinds of stuff. You want to make sure that you not only familiarize yourself with the environment, the equipment, make sure that your slides are up and working. So that was timely. But you also want to make sure that you take the opportunity to speak in front of an audience. Now, that may start off with your family first. That may start off with your coworkers. That may start off with someone who is in your um, orbit, if you will, a loved one. I can tell you without a doubt, you want to find out how your speech is going, talk to your significant other. I can assure you, they will tell you, not only did you wear the wrong shirt, you're sweating, you've got an ink stain on your shirt. You want to take every opportunity to speak in front of an audience. I'm not talking about the family pet. Okay. I'm not talking about that. That's not what we're talking about. We want to make sure that you have some type of feedback, some type of way to know that you're on pace and that you're on point. Now, body language. Oh, this is important. There are some, I cannot believe it. There are some times, you're gonna love distractions. There are some times when you look at your body language and you're gonna realize that you don't have everything that you need. You're at the podium and you decide to walk away from the podium. And once you step from behind the podium, your body language is exposed. I know that people look and analyze at how speakers do what they're supposed to do. I'll give you an example. If I'm starting to talk to you like this, okay, some people are offended by this. I might want to be stressing a point, but guess what? Some people might be just offended or focused on that finger. Why is he always shaking his finger? Why is he always shaking his finger? I've watched several speakers over the years. I've watched Dr. Dennis O'Neil always places his hands in front of himself. He always has an open and accepting posture, if you will. I've watched things like that. I've watched President Clinton, no matter how you feel about him. I've watched politically. I've watched President Clinton never points. He always used the knuckle. Barack Obama, the same thing, used the knuckle. George W. Bush, when he wanted to make a point, he made the fist, but it was a non-threatening fist. He always placed it in front of him. It was a look of determination that this is important, that I'm there with you and I'm prepared. So if you look at body language is very important. If you are a person who's nervous, it's going to show because you're going to look rigid. So what do? Well, just until you get your creative juices flowing, one of the things that you can do is if you have a podium in front of you, place your hands on the podium. Or if you place your hands on the podium and you have notes in front of you, Follow along with a finger. Now, what I see a lot of presenters do with their body language now is that they feel because we are in this box, if you will, now that we're in Zoom, my fear is that when we do go back to presenting in public, we're just going to sit still because we're used to focusing in one direction. I want to make sure that you're comfortable. How are you comfortable? Know your audience. Make sure that you practice repeatedly and relax. Relax. When I talked about the pilot before, when we talked about how they prepare to become pilots, their margin of error is so slim. Their margin for making a mistake is down into the fractions of percentages. They have to be right almost every time, or it's catastrophic failure, death, or a lot of money. Don't worry. In public speaking, there are only a few times that you can really, really bomb. Yes, you can give a bad speech. If you insult your audience, that's one thing. If you use profanity, that's another thing. If you have to stay away from religious references and the like. So what I'd like for you to do is practice with your stories, with your stories. I want you to take the time and think about it. After this webinar, I want you to think about stories in your life, because I've watched John Maxwell, one of my mentors, John Maxwell, da, 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 da. I've watched, I've seen John do speeches, and 80% of the speech was stories. He may have had 3 or 4 points, but he was able to drive home those points by sharing stories. Dr. Carl Holmes, whom I miss dearly, one of my dear mentors and friends, when I would help and help him set up some of the classes that he would do, he'd start out on a napkin. He'd make his 5 or 6 points. The next thing that happened, it ended up on a legal sheet. And after it got onto 2 legal sheets, he'd give me those legal sheets and I would help put his PowerPoint presentations together. I watched him deliver that same class. Believe it or not, he would teach for almost 2, maybe 3 hours and only use 5 of the slides. I would go, we spent hours putting that together, but he knew his audience. He had practiced repeatedly. He had a frame of reference. None of the distractions bothered him. And so many times when we had our programs and some of the instructors couldn't make it due to prior obligations in their departments and in their families, he would always look across the table and he'd say, "Little brother, it's time for us to go to work." And he would jot down just those points. And when he stood in front of an audience, he stood with confidence. His body language came from confidence. So where does your confidence come from? Your confidence comes from knowing your material, being passionate about it. But if you're telling your story, it's your story. You kind of should be familiar with it. That should be one way for you to get comfortable in speaking in public. Make sure you make eye contact. It's critical. Now, in my profession as a fire chief and as a firefighter, I've sat on both sides of the assessment center table, both as a candidate and a potential applicant, and I've sat on the other side as an assessor. Eye contact. Eye contact is one of the most critical ways of establishing not only command presence, but communicating with people. In fact, it's one of those check marks that they look for. So if you're not comfortable looking at people, what can you do? Look right above the bridge of their nose. If you look right above the bridge of their nose, I'm looking at you right now. I'm looking straight into the camera. Now I'm actually looking at the logo that's on the side of the camera. Now, my wife will tease me because she knows I have an astigmatism. She'll say, "Which way are you looking?" But you cannot tell when I shift my gaze from the side of the camera to the front of the camera. The same thing happens if you're uncomfortable with eye contact. Until you get comfortable, start looking at foreheads, especially if you're standing in front of a stage. If you're in front of a camera like I am now, look into the eye of the camera as if you're looking into someone's forehead. That'll make you a little more comfortable, but you've got to make eye contact. You have to. If you don't, sometimes you lose your audience. The other thing that happens is you need to slow down. Believe it or not, things are happening a lot faster than you think. Your adrenaline may be flowing. You may be excited about the presentation. You may be excited about the audience. You may be nervous. It's okay to feel nervous. Absolutely okay to feel nervous. What you want to do is make sure that you slow down. That doesn't mean slow down to the point where you're not watching the clock, because I can assure you, I'm actually watching a clock right in front of me. I want to make sure that I keep my contract with you. I said it'd be an hour, it's going to be an hour. Don't be afraid of pauses, particularly dramatic pauses. If you're talking about something that's really important to you, or if you're talking about a serious topic, pauses. Silence sometimes is golden, especially if you're making a salient point. When you make a point that's important, you want to pause before you move to the next item that you're going to talk about. So, what you can do is make your statement and say, how would you feel about that? If that happened to you, what would you do? Then move to your next item. Now, practice projecting your voice. We have all types of devices that can amplify our voices. Sometimes you'll be wearing a headset. Sometimes you'll have a handheld or a stationary microphone in front of you, a handheld, or you may have a lapel microphone, or one that's clipped to you. You might be wireless. If you've ever watched CNN, and I'm quite sure you've watched some of our political folks in elected officials in Washington, D.C., you'll see a microphone that they have on a wire that they clip into their pocket. They have to practice with that thing, believe it or not, because depending on where you place it, whichever side you're looking, it has to be able to pick up their voice. But you need to practice projecting your voice. One of the great things about some of the great speakers that I've heard is not only how they modulate their voices, but also when they're silent or when they go almost to a whisper, almost to the point where they want you to get a little closer, just a little bit closer, to try and focus on what they're saying. And then there are times they want to make sure that they project directly at you. They use the volume and intonation of their voices to stress a point. So to make sure you don't become a monotone speaker, monotone speaker, you want to practice your inflection, both high and low. You want to practice your pace, both fast and slow. Then use humor. Humor and emotion, all of us can relate to. Now, if you're not a joke teller, in my family, we have this thing when someone says a joke is not funny, we always look at each other. I'm funny, right? And we go, no, you're not funny. If you're not that person that's good at jokes, go on Google, find some very safe jokes that you can tell, and it's okay to make fun of yourself. Okay. I talked about preparation tonight. I turned off every phone in here. I carry two of them. They're all off. Which one was ringing? My office phone, the one I hardly ever use that captures messages. That's something that I didn't check. Ha 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 ha. Jokes on me. It's okay for you to make fun of yourself, but not to the degree that you diminish yourself either. Because if you start to attack yourself, then folks will not only question your self-worth, but you know what they'll say? Well, why am I listening to this person anyway if they got so many bad things going on? But I've watched my mentors in the past. They've got some pretty good jokes. And so you can utilize them. Don't become overbearing with them, but use humor to bridge from one point to another. And emotion. When you're telling your story, when you tell your story, it's your story. It's okay to be sensitive about your story. But please, please always go back to the first thing that we said, know your audience, because make sure that you're not telling stories and jokes that will offend someone, that may cause harm to your audience, that may cause a disconnect. I still remember the very first bad review I got in teaching a class. If anyone knows me, you know I give as good as it gets. You tell a joke, I got one better. Hardy, har, 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 har. But in this particular class, because we're required to go through our evaluations immediately after the class, which I think is great, one of the students wrote, What you said today in the classroom hurt my feelings, and I will never ever take another class with you again. That was the summer of 1992. And I still get a knot in my throat when I think about it because I don't know what I said. I don't know when I said it. But at that point, I disconnected with someone. And I disconnected to the degree that not only did I hurt that person's feelings, but they said they'll never, ever take another class with me again. So I didn't even have the opportunity to fix it. Well, I'm happy to say that I did fix it because I'm now very careful about what I say when I'm speaking publicly. So, use of humor and emotion, always good. Now, watch for feedback and adapt to it. If you're telling jokes and no one's laughing but you, there's a problem. If you see numbers of folks that are being distracted for whatever reason, or they seem bored, then you have to be very, very careful. Now, it's a lot going on in your head. You're trying to remember what your point is, the point is that you're making. You're trying to read the audience, and the good speakers read the audience as well. They know how to change gears. They know how to change the pitch in their voice. They know when to knock a story off or cut it off immediately and move to the next slide. We want to make sure that you are adapting. You watch for feedback. Now, but also ignore naysayers. You're going to have some folks who come in and just cross their arms because they don't want to be there. Remember when we talked about knowing your audience? I've had to do classes and presentations in workplaces where folks did not want to be there. Not only did they not want to be at the presentation, they didn't want to be at work, period. And so now you're here, you are. Or another department or organization brings you in to discuss a particular topic. And everyone wants to sit there and say, oh, you had to bring this guy or gal in. We already know what we're doing. Look at the body language. Now, we look at body language in clusters. Ignore people who tend to just want to eye you down, if you will, and give you a hard time and furrow their brow at you. If everyone in the room is doing it, I'd say that that's an issue. But if there are one or two folks, don't let that distract you. You want to make sure as you read your organization, read the audience, read the audience, you want to make sure that if you are missing a point, it is that you are missing a point, not that there's someone there to try to give you a hard time, because then you can count them as a distraction as well. Start off on a great note if you can. Always tell them what you're going to talk about. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. But also attach stories. Use an interesting anecdote. Use questions, if you will. There are different ways that you can open. If you're talking about a particularly difficult subject, start off with a question. Hey, this has happened to me. Has this ever happened to you? And if it did, what did you do about it? Well, in our discussion today, we're going to talk about what happened to me that I've heard happen to other folks, and I'd like to get your feedback on it. And so you start off on a good note or a great note by engaging your audience. Use audiovisual aids wisely. That's one of the reasons. Thank you. Someone spotted right away that I had my notes up. As you can tell, I wasn't using them to begin with. They're good as a backup for me in case I get distracted or lost. I'm able to keep my point and on time. But I prefer just a few slides with pictures because I like the fact that we're able to talk and engage. But we have all seen death by PowerPoint. We've actually seen people that sit there and read the slide and say, use audiovisual aids wisely, and then go on to the next slide. And then there's the next slide. And they read the slides to you. I would be very, very careful, very, very careful. I can almost guarantee you're not going to be invited back. Turn nervousness into excitement. You're going to be nervous. You're going to be nervous if it's a one-on-one conversation with someone you've never met. You're going to be nervous if you're speaking before a large organization. It's over a year ago. Over a year ago, my good friend Bobby Halton turned to me and said, actually, he didn't tell me. He announced it at one of our dinners that I was going to be doing the opening day speech at FDIC last year. Now, I've spoken before groups before. I've spoken before my peers before, and I'm comfortable speaking before my peers. But FDIC, opening day, that's Bobby Halton's slot. Anyone who's ever been at FDIC, it's 30,000 firefighters in the city of Indianapolis every April up until COVID. There are two opening day speeches, and then there are the keynote speeches. But he always does the opening. Well, over a year ago, he honored me by asking me to give the opening day speech for last year. We did not have it because of COVID, and we've moved the date back to August. But as soon as he said it's on, I began every step that I'm telling you about now in preparation. I even had someone read the speech, and he teases me all the time. Now, I've spoken before. I have never spoken on a platform that not only will be viewed by some tens of thousands of firefighters, but also replayed over and over again on their platform. I'm nervous. I'll tell you, I'm nervous. But how that nervousness goes away is I channel it into energy to make sure that I review that speech. Even though it's supposed to be last year, I'm still finding things that I'm tweaking about that speech. Now, doesn't mean that it's going to go well, but I'm going to do everything that I can to prepare for that moment, not only to share information with my peers, but to honor the opportunity that my good friend has given me. So we'll see how that goes. Don't read directly unless you have to. There are going to be times when you're going to have your notes in front of you. You're going to have everything that you prepared to do, and all of a sudden, everything goes out. I've actually been places where I had to do a presentation where the projectors went out, didn't bring my own, the projectors went out, and I had to give my talk. And so all I had was my laptop, well, actually a tablet in front of me. What I ended up doing is what I'm doing with you now, is I attempted to convert as many of them into slides without words so that I could just use the pictures, reference, and stories to make my my comments and to be able to deliver the speech and communicate. If you practice with your stories, and I want you from tonight on, every other chance that you get a journal. I don't know how many of you journal. I journal all the time. If you've got a journal or a diary, just set up about 4 or 5 pages just for stories. You don't have to write out the whole story. Write out different stories that have impacted your life, that have changed how you do business, if you will, how you communicate with people, because you won't have to read from the paper if it's your story. So then you put your points together. Like I said, my pastor is a transcript preacher, but if you watch him in action, you will never, ever, unless you see him pull those cards aside, you will not know. I want to make sure that from tonight on, you practice with a few bullets, insert your stories, insert your humor, and you will be able to deliver speeches, both in public and private, that you can be proud of and that you can be comfortable with. Specific speeches, these are tough. There have been times I've been asked to speak at a friend's funeral by the family at the last minute. I'm grieving, they're grieving. It is a tough thing. When it comes to specific speeches, particularly, I don't know of anyone on this call that's going to be delivering a eulogy, but even if you make remarks at a friend's funeral, it's going to be tough. Be yourself. Absolutely be yourself. I got teased later on by some of our colleagues and friends after Dr. Carl Holmes passed away, and we were out at his funeral paying our respects. And I was honored to give a few remarks, and I was overcome with emotion. I just couldn't. I'm sorry. I just couldn't. I jotted down a few notes. I knew what I wanted to say, but it was just so difficult. It just kept happening. I composed myself as best I could, but I just couldn't. And I knew what I wanted to say. I don't know if it came out that way, but I knew. Cassie Peters just texted me. He says, "Yeah, I'm the one who gave you the handkerchief." Well, I appreciate that. But the sentiment, that was a difficult time to speak in public. What I had to rely on were the stories that I had and the relationship that I had. And I needed to be able to get that out, not just to share what a wonderful person he was and how many lives that he touched, but the relationship and how it affected how I do a lot of things in our business. So when it comes to specific situations, make sure that you are as focused as you possibly can be, but it may or may not go perfect. Don't beat yourself up. Don't at all. I took the ribbing, I took the laughter. We tried to break the moment afterwards with some humor, but I said to myself, Dr. Carl Holmes was worth every tear, absolutely every tear. So with that, I'm going to launch a quick poll and get off that. I want you to try and answer that if you can, and we're going to keep moving. When it comes to accepting an award, be humble. Thank those. No, thank those who helped you. No one gets anywhere by themselves. Absolutely no one. So you thank the people that help you. Are you going to forget some names? You might. So say right away. I don't like to name folks, but these are some of the folks that were extremely helpful in my life. I had a friend, Harry Amica, who didn't like to speak in public. He was a firefighter, didn't like to speak in public. But when he did speak, what he said had so much value. You would say, why didn't you share that with everyone? Yeah, I don't like the limelight. And there are some folks who don't like the limelight. I understand it. But some of us, due to your jobs, you know what? Um, we're going to have to be able to speak. So um, step up when it comes to accepting an award. Thank the group. Be humble and continue to move on. Thank the folks that honored you. When it comes to introducing someone, again, know your audience, know the person. Try to be as direct as possible. Honor the person that you're introducing. Make sure that you get their bio or their information up front. Try to read as much of it as you can if you don't know the person. Practice it again, of course. Ask permission if you can, if it's time worthy, if you're under some type of time constraint. If you have to, ask the person, is it possible that you can edit it? Or the person that will ask you or give you the opportunity, ask if you can edit it. Because you want to make sure that, if that person took the time to send you that bio and they want it read, read it. I myself, I get uncomfortable with my bio. I keep chopping stuff off my bio every time. You get uncomfortable sometimes. You try to get an introduction down to 60 seconds or more, if you can. Now, we're at the end, believe it or not. I said I was going to keep you at an hour. I wanted to leave some opportunity for us to talk. There are so many different facets of public speaking, but I was hoping that just a few points, if you could take away one or two things that can assist you in the future to sort of ease you into public speaking, you've got a story to tell. You absolutely have a story to tell. So when you're done speaking, you say, thank you, like I'm thanking you now. You say thank you when you're done. There's nothing wrong with that. Courtesy and civility seem to be two things that have been lost in not only our speeches and talking points with each other. I don't even call it the news anymore at night. I call it the views, if you will. What I want to make sure is that when you are having the opportunity or given the opportunity to speak, it is an opportunity to be thankful for. Someone thought enough of you to ask your opinion. Someone thought enough of you to think that you had a view or something to add, something of value to share with others. And you want to make sure that you honor that. Absolutely. You want to make sure that you honor that. I see a couple of hands raised. You thank your audience for your time. I want to make sure that after this webinar, I have most of your email addresses. I'm going to be sending you a link with some of the resources on public speaking where you can get some information, additional information. I want to thank you for these moments that we shared. I always try to at least present for 40 to 45 minutes with one of these free webinars. so that we can have at least 10 to 15 minutes worth of questions that I'll be reading back and answering. The polling is going to close. I hear my folks, they're playing my song. It's New Haven. I'm going to stop the share for a hot second, and I want to make sure that everyone got into the poll. It looks like almost. And we're going to share the results. Okay. So most of you, through your life or your job or work, you have the opportunity to speak in public. I like the fact that 67% of you don't shy away from it, and that 63% of you are comfortable with it. That's excellent. Now, is that before or after? Oh, there we go. Was that before or after this little presentation that we did? We're going to find out. All right. Last two slides. I hope you're feeling more confident after we've had this conversation. And I could not do any of this without the love and support of my family, friends, mentors. I had to be the public information officer in the city of Jersey City in New Jersey at one time, which was very difficult because you want to make sure that you're providing the public with information as best as you have it. But sometimes it's going to be difficult information. As the chief in the city of New Haven, it is a difficult time when not only you have to go from informing family members of the serious injury or loss of a loved one, and then seconds or minutes later, a camera is stuck in your face. We're all human. We all have connections. We all have emotions, if you will. But the more you know your audience, the more you prepare, the more you practice, public speaking can become easier and easier. And if you're looking for that new job, that new opportunity, that promotion, public speaking, the way that you convey your thoughts and present yourself are key, absolutely key. We're going to be doing a series of webinars. I'm going to be doing one once a month. They're going to be free of charge. Just want to add value to you. Next month, March 25th, we're going to be doing identifying your leader language. If you notice, there's a theme. We're going to be talking about a few things. After this, you're going to get a short survey on topics that you may want to see in the future. I've worked with some incredible people in my life. I have incredible people in my life, my family. I learned from my parents that you treat people the way you want to be treated. And if you're ever given an opportunity, don't take advantage of it, but make sure that you're prepared for it. And if you're prepared for whatever door is opened, be prepared to step through. I want to thank you for your time tonight. I'm going to be hanging out the next 10 to 15 minutes. We're going to jump onto the question and answers. And if you got to go, I understand. I do. Question, does your prep get rid of the feelings of being not as knowledgeable as some attendees? Yes. There is something out there, Chief Cassie Peters, thanks for the question. There is something called imposter syndrome that certain people feel. Dr. Amy Cuddy, when she talks about, and you can look at her on a TED Talk, she's got a wonderful TED Talk on nonverbal communication. She said one of the things that she saw when she was teaching at Harvard Business School is that there were not a lot of women in the business school class at the time that she was a professor, and that towards the end of your matriculation, that you're scored on presentation after presentation after presentation. It's most of your mark. And so because there were so many males in the class, and so many of them were comfortable with speaking in public, she saw a disparate impact in not only the grades, but the number of people that were participating. It became almost a point of diminishing return because she wanted to encourage these women to speak up and to understand that they had every right to be there, that they had the smarts, that, you know, it was okay to stand up in front of this group of men and tell them what you know. And so in her TED Talk, she talks about that. And she talks about the importance of acting as if you prepare, you know your subject, you know your audience, then you should be prepared to deliver. Are you going to be nervous? Yes, you're going to be nervous. There are going to be times that when you are standing in front of an audience and someone introduces you as an expert, no, I just studied a few things here. Not an expert. In fact, I don't believe there are any experts. I think there's some people that know a whole lot of stuff. But what I found is someone told me to get rid of my poll. Well, I'll get rid of the poll. The hang on a second. We're going for it. We're going for it. They said, get rid of the poll, Chief. I'm stopping sharing the poll. How's that? Thank you. Actually, I was very comfortable with my face hidden. How about that? If you had this face, you'd keep a poll up too. Ba-dum-bop. See how that works? There's something called imposter syndrome. When people are placed in certain positions or certain circumstances and situation, they feel that they either don't belong there or that they don't know enough to present. That's why we want you to prepare. I hope that answers your question. Hey, Darnell. I hope that answered your question, Chief. Dr. O'Neill is in the house. Dr. O'Neill, thank you so much. I guess you've got time. You're retired now. Thank you so much for joining us, Doctor. One of the mentors that I talked about, Dr. Dennis O'Neill, still checking up on me, I see. Appreciate you, sir. Give my best to Mrs. O'Neill, Jan. Someone said, how do you work through distractions? How do you work through distractions is to make sure that you know your subject. It always goes back to knowing your subject, knowing your audience, and it's preparation. I've been working on a couple of pieces, and I'll be sharing them with you at another time. It's called, I'm working on a work called Empowerment Principles. I'm part of a group of empowerment community where we're trying to, and it's an offshoot of the John Maxwell team, but we're trying to help people with their personal and professional growth. And so I've been doing a lot of studying over the last couple of years. Last year was as tragic as COVID has been, as busy as we have been, both in our department and in the world. Folks that know me know I'm an insomniac. I'm up all night. I read a lot, I study a lot. And so when you're in the public eye, or when you want to prep to become a public speaker, you have to read. You have to read. If you don't want to read, get Audible, but you have to read because you want to know different people's opinions. You want to learn what different authors see about the world or the subjects that you're into. Sometimes you'll read about subjects that you're not really into, but because your audience is into them, you need to read them. And there's an old saying, if you're not pulling the answers out of your head, you're pulling them out of someplace else. So you want to read. So back to Chief Peter's question, how do you overcome the imposter syndrome, if you will, is to be prepared and to have a frame of reference from what you're speaking. And don't be ashamed to say, I don't know. I don't know, but I'll find the answer. I'll help you find the answer. We can find it together. In fact, there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what? I haven't heard that term before. Stop. Everyone take out your phones. And you point, you look up that term. You look up that term, and then I want the antithesis of that. And you make them part of the solution and not the problem. That helps. Thank you. Some of you are saying awesome job. I greatly appreciate it. Fantastic. Do you practice a standard statement for the media? Chad, that's a great question. I don't practice a standard statement because every situation is different, but I do have a format. So what I'll do for my friends that are in fire, I'll share with you, I have something called an incident detail form. And basically it is the same information. What time did we receive the alarm? How long did it take us to get there? Because it's always a question. How many firefighters are on the scene? What did they have? What did they do about it? Did they need help? Were there any injuries or fatalities? Were they displaced? Were there displacements? Do we have to involve other organizations? Any difficulties? Any things that went bad or went well? Be transparent about that. So yeah, I have a form that we use, and we just plug that information in. And what I've been doing lately, if you watch any of the Connecticut news, I've been preparing the deputy chiefs and battalion chiefs because I've been on camera enough. I prepare them, and I'll actually walk up to the incident commander and tell them, look, I'm going to run your fire. The cameras are right over there. You know the drill. And immediately, I love it. I watch them. They get their phone out. They get their tablet out. They're getting the time, the number of firefighters, number of displacements. They're talking to the PD to see if anything happened prior to them getting there. So I'm very proud of the growth in my organization. But yeah, we do have something like that, and I'll share it with everyone that I have an email with. All right. Fantastic. All right. We are at the top of the hour. I said I wasn't going to keep you more than an hour. I promised to deliver at least 10 webinars this year, and we're going to be doing them once a month. I'm going to do an extra one on February 28th. It's the leap year and it's the last day of Black History Month. It's going to be a small talk on diversity and inclusion, and it's going to be, it's called Another Seat at the Table. I'll be offering that as well. But insofar as keeping with my friends and cohorts, Rodney Payne is a great friend of mine. We coach each other in this thing, and Jordana Foster out of Florida. And so we've been going back and forth, webinar for webinar, just trying to add value and assist folks through these times where we're all cooped up. And we may even change the format, go to a meeting format one time where I can see your lovely faces and I can hear your lovely voices. But in terms of what we have going, all that I am, I owe. I live eternally in the red. I want to thank you. I hope I answered all of the questions. I'm looking again. Hang on. Can you give us an example of one of your more awkward speaking experiences and how you handled it? Yeah. So I was invited to speak at a particular department outside of my state, at another state, another place in the country. And I guess it was awkward for them and awkward for me, but I got off the plane. They had a sign with my name on it. All right. And I walked up to the two gentlemen, the two firefighters, and I said, "Hey guys, how you doing?" They said, "We're fine. Excuse me." And they stepped past me. And before I could say, "Hey, I'm Alston," they just kind of walked away. So I went to the traveler's desk, got to rent a car, got to the hotel, checked in. About 40 minutes later, the chief of their department called and said, "Hey, John, you're here?" I said, "Yeah, I'm here." He goes, "I sent some guys to pick you up." I said, "Yeah, I thought I saw them." I said, "But I'm good." He said, "Well, we're going to take you out to dinner." I said, "Chief, I'm good. I'll see you guys in the morning. All is well." I'd say about 20 minutes later, right at the door, and I opened the door, and the two gentlemen opened the door, and I opened the door. They said, "You left us." I said, "I didn't leave you guys." He said, "You left us." I said, "Gentlemen, I didn't leave you." I said, "Look, I'll see you guys in the morning. We're going to have a great time, blah, 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 blah." So go downstairs to the ballroom in the hotel the next morning. Everyone's there. Um, I'm, I'm prepping. I'm ready. And now I'm trying to read the audience. And they're all like this. And by the way, I was the only person that looked like me. And I mean that sincerely. I was the only person that looked like I was from Jersey City. And so I stood up and I said, "I want to thank Chief such and such and this department for inviting me. And I want to thank the two gentlemen that came to pick me up for dinner last night. Don't worry, I wasn't expecting you either, but we're going to have a great time. And we're going to have such a great dinner tonight on the two of them. I hope you bring bail money." That was awkward, but we changed it into something else. Another time I went to speak and I had a Halls stuck in my throat. And I kept trying to clear my throat and I couldn't clear my throat. Thankfully, the audience allowed me 3 to 5 minutes. They went on break to try and clear it because I just couldn't start and I kept trying to start. So yeah, I appreciate that. All right. Thank you for that. What is Team Maxwell? Team Maxwell is, I think, glad you asked. John Maxwell, if you Google John Maxwell is one of the most renowned leadership and communication specialists probably in the world. He's trained tens of thousands of folks. I used to read his books, or still read his books. I used to read his books all the time. And I would pull out these little nuggets and I would make them part of my speeches. He had great quotes. He had great information on communication and leadership. Later on, he started a licensing program where you could be licensed to use his stuff. I mean, everyone grabs a quote from here to there, but now you could actually teach his books. He's got some wonderful books. I actually have a website. I'm not here to sell anything tonight. I'm just wearing it in honor of this organization that I'm part of, that allows me to teach my stuff and to teach their stuff as well. And if you'd like further information, in my future emails, you'll see a little link down the bottom where you can go and look at it. But in terms of leadership and communication, I hope these names ring true. Zig Ziglar, Les Brown, Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey wrote the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, 7 Effective Habits of Highly Successful People. He wrote a second book, which was the 8th habit, and it talked about your voice, that everyone has a voice, everyone has a tribe, everyone has someone who will listen to them, and you have a story to tell. And so working with those folks and being trained by them, Paul Martinelli, Roddy Galbraith, those are folks who have coached me over the years, along with the other mentors that I mentioned, in terms of crafting my art to be able to be comfortable speaking with people and being able to put stories together and to be able to stay on point. They've allowed me to do that. And so, and they've trained me how to do that. So yeah, I'll have some information on that. Thank you, folks. How do you fight against dry mouth when you're speaking? One thing that you could do, depending on what time of day, okay, you're speaking, I like to drink hot water with lemon in the morning. It sort of like clears the phlegm out and all that other stuff, you know, helps you to enunciate. A little lip balm, lozenges like Halls or something like that, that works. There's nothing wrong with having a bottle of water there. There's nothing wrong with having a cup of water there to sip. It's nothing wrong. People understand that you're nervous or that it's hot with these lights and everything else with dry mouth. So yeah, having water there, it's fine. Chief, I noticed that Maxwell uses an iPad for his notes. Do you use the technology? Absolutely, I do. Most of the speeches that I've done now in the past, if there's no teleprompter, I use one of my 10-inch pads. Some folks use iPads. I've always been an Android person, so I use a Samsung tablet. And what you saw with the slides, I'll either have the same slide presentation, but only the bullet points, so that the audience sees the slides and I present, but I only use the bullet points. So yeah, absolutely, it works. And many of them now will actually control your entire presentation. But again, the more technology you get involved, the more opportunities for it to fail. No questions, but happy to listen. Hey, Chief Smith. Okay, as the newly appointed PIO, oh, this was very helpful. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'll make sure that you get that sheet too, LaRon. Thank you, folks that are saying it's awesome job. Thank you. Hot water with lemon, someone said. When starting off on a good note, is it best to open up with a joke or introducing yourself? Okay, well, if someone has already introduced you, that takes care of that. You can also have, right after your title slide, a presenter note and have your introduction there. That's one way. But mostly, Dennis, it's knowing your audience. If you're and the topic that you're going to be talking about. I'm comfortable after 30 some odd years in the fire service talking to firefighters, but I get nervous telling jokes with firefighters. It's just a slippery slope. It's too easy to say something wrong. So I do practice with some jokes, but I tend to mostly try to keep it light without telling a specific joke. I'll say something like this. You can always tell a firefighter, but you can't tell them much. That's a safe joke. As opposed to 2 Corinthians walk into a bar. Okay, I'm not going to do that. All right. Any other questions? Going once. Well, it's 8 o'clock. I want to thank you all for stopping and spending some time with me on a snowy night. You could have been any place else, but you chose to be with me and having this conversation. I greatly appreciate it. You'll be hearing more about the presentations we're going to do in the future. We're going to continue to do these free webinars because we want to share and help folks in their personal and professional growth. This is John Alston for Fire Officer Trust. I want to thank especially my mentor, Dr. Dennis O'Neil. I do not take it lightly that you're here, sir. You be well. God bless you all.